The studio was buzzing with excitement that morning as Lorraine Kelly prepared to welcome one of Britain's most beloved actors, Hugh Grant. Known for his dry wit, charm, and intelligence, he had always been a favorite among viewers. The producers had hyped the episode for weeks, teasing fans about a rare, candid conversation with the rom-com legend. The set was polished to perfection, the audience settled, and Lorraine, in her usual cheerful spirit, rehearsed her warm introduction. But beneath the calm professionalism of the crew, a quiet anxiety stirred. Hugh Grant, famous for his sharp tongue and unpredictable interviews, was known to clash with hosts who ventured too far into his personal life. When Hugh arrived at the studio, he was as courteous as ever, greeting everyone with polite nods and dry quips that made even the interns laugh nervously. Yet there was an unmistakable tension about him, that particular weariness celebrities carry when they've endured too many superficial questions. Lorraine greeted him warmly backstage. "Lovely to see you again, Hugh," she said with her trademark smile. He returned it, slightly stiff. "Lovely to be here, Lorraine. Though I never quite know why I agree to these things." She laughed it off, assuming he was joking, but the tone was sharper than she expected. Once the cameras rolled, everything seemed smooth at first. Lorraine welcomed him with enthusiasm, praising his new political drama and his ongoing charity work. The audience applauded, and Hugh managed his familiar half-smile. They began by discussing his recent film, his return to serious acting, and the growing sense that he was choosing projects with deeper meaning. He spoke eloquently about storytelling, about finding truth in art, and for a few minutes, the conversation glided effortlessly. But when Lorraine shifted the topic toward his past, the tabloid years, the scandals, and his complicated relationship with fame, his body language changed instantly. Lorraine asked gently, "You've always had such a fascinating relationship with the press, Hugh. Do you feel like you've finally made peace with it all?" He gave a short laugh, not quite amused. "Peace," he repeated. "That's a very optimistic word for a war that never really ended." The audience chuckled nervously, unsure whether he was joking. Lorraine smiled, trying to keep it light. "Well, you've certainly handled it with humor over the years," she said. He shook his head slightly. "Humor's just the polite way to survive humiliation," he replied. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lorraine, ever the professional, tried to steer the conversation toward his activism for media reform. "You've been quite outspoken about media intrusion," she said carefully. "Do you think things have improved since you started campaigning?" Hugh leaned forward, his tone suddenly sharp. "Improved? Hardly. They've just learned to do it differently, quieter, smarter, more poisonous. The tabloids might have lost some power, but the culture of voyeurism is alive and well. We've just dressed it up as entertainment." The audience fell silent, sensing the edge in his voice. Trying to diffuse the tension, Lorraine smiled gently. "I suppose people are just curious, though. You've been in the spotlight for so long, people feel like they know you." Hugh's lips tightened. "That's exactly the problem," he said flatly. "They don't know me. They know a version of me built out of gossip columns and headlines. I play a character on screen, and then I spend my real life trying to convince people I'm not him." Lorraine blinked, momentarily thrown. "But surely fame has its perks," she offered. "It's given you a platform for the good causes you care about." That seemed to touch a nerve. "Perks," he said, leaning back with a bitter laugh. "The privilege of having strangers dissect my relationships? The joy of being stalked by photographers while I walk my children to school? Forgive me if I don't find that terribly perky." The room grew still. Lorraine tried to regain control of the tone. "Of course, I didn't mean it like that," she said softly. "I just meant your voice carries weight, you've used it to fight for privacy laws." Hugh sighed. "And yet here I am, on a show that thrives on curiosity about people's private lives. Funny, isn't it?" Lorraine's smile faltered slightly. "Well, we try to celebrate people rather than pry," she said, still composed. Hugh nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But celebration can be a polite disguise for intrusion, don't you think? The audience gasped quietly. Lorraine's professionalism shone through as she replied calmly, "That's a fair point, but I'd like to think viewers tune in because they care, not because they're nosy." He tilted his head. Caring and consuming aren't always the same thing. Sometimes curiosity is just hunger with better manners. The control room was signaling her to move on, but she pressed gently, trying to rescue the warmth. "You've always been brutally honest, Hugh," she said, smiling again. "But you do still enjoy performing, don't you?" He sighed. "I enjoy acting," he said firmly. "Performing myself for interviews like this? Not so much. I've spent half my life trying not to become a caricature of the man the press invented." Lorraine tried to laugh softly. "You're far from a caricature," she said. "You're one of our most admired actors." He gave a wry smile. "Admired, dissected, mocked, it's all part of the same circus." Lorraine, feeling the pressure to soften the moment, shifted to lighter ground. "Let's talk about your family," she began. "You seem very happy these days," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Lorraine, I don't talk about my family." She paused, realizing she'd hit a wall. "Of course, I understand," she said quickly. "I was just saying," he cut in again. "No, it's important. That line doesn't blur for me. Public life ends where my children begin." The audience stirred awkwardly, sensing the rising tension. Lorraine nodded. "Absolutely. I completely respect that." There was an uneasy silence. Lorraine tried once more to steer things back on track. "Well, let's focus on your film then," she said with her characteristic cheer. "It's such a wonderful story about redemption." Hugh smiled thinly. "Ah yes, redemption, something the media loves to grant after they've destroyed you first." Lorraine exhaled softly. "I think audiences just love to see people grow," she said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Hugh's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "If only the press believed that," he muttered. At this point, the exchange was visibly strained. Lorraine, maintaining her composure, said quietly, "I hope you don't feel ambushed, Hugh. We truly appreciate your time." He looked at her for a moment, then unclipped his microphone. "No ambush," he said evenly. "Just déjà vu." Lorraine blinked. "You're leaving?" she asked, her tone calm but surprised. "I think we've said enough," he replied, standing up. "I'd rather leave before I say something I regret." The crew froze. The cameras were still rolling as Hugh adjusted his jacket and turned to the stunned audience. "Enjoy your morning, everyone," he said politely before walking off set. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorraine sat perfectly still for a moment, then smiled faintly at the camera. "Well," she said with grace, "live television, ladies and gentlemen, you never quite know what's going to happen." The control room immediately cut to an ad break. When the show returned, she handled it with calm professionalism, assuring viewers that Hugh is a passionate man who speaks from the heart. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere was electric, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and awe. By afternoon, clips of the moment flooded social media. "Hugh Grant walks out on Lorraine Kelly" became the day's top headline. Fans were divided, some praised his authenticity, others accused him of arrogance. Lorraine's composure was widely applauded, while Hugh's defenders argued he'd simply had enough of being treated like a spectacle. The debate dominated the news cycle, and even fellow actors weighed in, calling it a masterclass in boundaries. That evening, Hugh released a short statement through his publicist: "I respect Lorraine and her team. I simply prefer conversations that stay focused on the work, not the man." Lorraine responded gracefully the next morning, saying on air, "We adore Hugh and always will. Sometimes passionate people just feel things deeply." Her warm tone diffused much of the tension, turning the episode from controversy into legend. Weeks later, when asked about it in another interview, Hugh laughed lightly. "Lorraine's a lovely woman," he said. "But live TV brings out